Hello, everyone. Jeffrey Nance here with you. Welcome to another edition of Tip Tuesday. Glad to have you guys joining us, whether you're watching this live or catching us on one of our recordings on several outlets that we have available to listen to these things. Appreciate you joining us each week. Today's topic is overcoming fear and greed in trading. This is a topic that some of you guys, if you've been with us for a while, have probably heard us mention multiple times. But we have new people coming in regularly, and it's an important topic. In fact, it's probably an overlooked topic for most people because they just think, well, I just want to learn how to trade. I just want to know how to, you know, do what I'm supposed to do so I can get the amount of money that I want to get or whatever. Uh, so let's start out with some basic things. God created us. We are His, and He has created us with emotions. So emotions are good, but we don't create emotions necessarily, right? So in other words, somebody says a funny joke and you laugh. You didn't sit out there and think, I am going to make myself laugh, right? I mean, if it's funny, then you laugh. If somebody hits you or you stub your toe, you go, ow, that really hurt. You feel pain, right? So now you can get angry or whatever. Jesus says, in your anger, do not sin. So it's not we can see very clearly here through scripture, it's not the initial emotion that is the sin, it's our reaction afterwards. So if you are angry, then what do you do with that? Do you handle it well? So let's take a similar approach to fear and greed. So we will likely have these emotions. How do we handle them appropriately? So, how can we, if you will, have fear and greed without sinning? So, how can we have these things, know that they're going to be present, and yet not have them impact us in a very negative way when it comes to our trading? Well, let's break it down first. All right. So, what is fear? The way I like to think through fear is to ask a question, and I think this pertains to us in a bigger realm, but it also impacts us in each trade that we make. Is my desire for success greater than my fear of failure? Okay, so I'll repeat it. Is my desire for success greater than my fear of failure? So, how does that relate to us in a very particular way? Well, every trade we enter has the potential to be an expense, meaning as soon as I get into that trade, there is a possibility that I could lose money on that trade. Well, is that possibility so great in my mind that I'm willing to say, you know what, I just can't handle it. I don't even want to get into a trade if there's a possibility that I could lose money. So the only sure way to not lose money in the market is to just simply not be in the market. The great downside to not being in the market is that you can't make any money in it either. So obviously we have a desire. We know that there are people out there making tons of money, and we want to join those people because we have these grand plans of what we want to do with it. Each of us has been told since the first session that we attended that we need to have a why. So what is your why? What is your motivation? Well, I think that motivation ought to be tied directly into this idea of fear. So fear is an obstacle, but what do we do when we reach obstacles? Do we overcome them? Do we go around them? Do we go through them? Do we go underneath them? It's an obstacle. It's something to be overcome, but how do we handle that? And fear is one of those obstacles that as a trader, we just simply have to learn to overcome. It's not that you're not going to be fearful, but you have to say, okay, in the midst of my fear, I always go back to the story of Joshua and Caleb. So we have these people that have been given this word by God, that they're going to enter the promised land. I mean, just think about the idea of what the phrase means, promised land. Like it is your land. It has been given to you already. It is your land. I have given it to you. I have promised to give it to you and to your descendants. It is a promised land. And yet here the Israelites stand and they go, man, that's a great land. It really is. It's a land flowing with milk and honey, but there's giants in the land. And the fear of the giants keeps them from entering the promised land. Well, so a generation passes away, and here comes Joshua and Caleb, and they're getting ready to lead this younger generation into the promised land. So people have died in the promised land as well, but there's still giants, and giants are still having giant kids. The giants haven't been removed, but their approach to it has been changed. So it's not, and you can read through this, and you can see over and over again if you just read in the book of Joshua there that God says to Joshua, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. I am with you. Do not be afraid. I am with you. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid for the land I am giving to you. I promised you." Over and over, we see this promise, this idea that you are an overcomer. And now, guys, as they enter the promised land, they still have to go and fight. So, as we're doing our trading, we still have to do things the right way. We still have to prepare. We still have to put in the time. We have to put in the effort. But we can't let fear of potential failure keep us from getting into trades or becoming traders that recognize risk. Risk is an inherent thing that comes with trading in the stock market. Now, when you have a system, you can begin to shift the idea of risk and how it looks. We can make it manageable. But we have to understand this is fearful. There is uncertainty there, but we need to approach it as if I am so concerned about my desire for success that I'm willing to face my fear and overcome that. The other thing I would say about fear is to put in some guidelines. So we talk about stopping out, regulating your risk as much as possible. Don't put in so much money that the amount of money that you have in any particular trade at any particular time causes you to not sleep well or causes you to not treat other people well because you're so concerned about the amount of money that you have. So that's a fear that can be avoided just by putting in less money until you're ready to handle that. I like to talk about proportional trading. Go make $100 first with X amount of dollars. All right, now go make 200 with double that, 300, 400, thousands, 10,000s plus. So you can do what's called proportional trading. Now your expenses are still going to be big, but they'll be proportional to your wins. And that can help you with dealing with fear as well. When it comes to greed, people look at greed, and there's a couple of things that we can look at. We can often think that greed is actually just a desire to get more money. I've had people say that. They say, "Jeffrey, I didn't feel like I was being greedy. I felt like I was just trying to make more money." To which I responded and said, what do we think the definition of greed is exactly? So how do you approach that? Because we talk about it and we say, well, you want to win big and lose little. Well, how do you quantify what is actually winning big? So if a stock is only going to move like $2 and it does, is that a big win? If you make, say, $1, I don't know, 85, $1.90, $1.95 on a $2 move, did you win big? Absolutely. I mean, you squeezed a lot out of that orange, right? I mean, that's a big win. If it's going to move $10 though, and you only make two, we would prefer that you would have stayed in that trade to make a little bit more money. So now it comes down to knowledge, because sometimes fear and greed both are really about knowledge. Like what do I really know? How much do I know about this trade? Should I stop out? Should I stay in this trade? What's likely to happen tomorrow? What does the pattern say? We get to a traffic light, we know it's green, yellow, and red. So we know that there's certain things that we should do at particular times based on the color that we're seeing on the light. Well, we need to have a similar approach to our trading. There's certain things that we should do in particular situations. So considering market tone, looking at our particular trade, saying, okay, based on this particular pattern, here's what it ought to do. But if it doesn't do that, here's what I'm going to do. So we have contingency plans. That's going to help you deal with greed. And the other thing to realize is once your stock has completed its pattern, then it's going to turn and go the opposite way more often than not. And so staying in that trade actually works against you. So now you say, well, I want to make a little bit more money, but what you end up doing is you end up making less because you stayed in the trade after that trade had completed its move. So one of the best things you can do when it comes to dealing with greed is be more and more familiar with the actual movement. Like, what is likely? Where is this stock? Where's its most probable destination? So that when it reaches it, I can understand this is where it was likely to head. And unless it's just blowing through resistance, or in a bearish trade just blowing through support, then we need to understand that those lines, those exponential moving averages, help us control our greed because they are our target prices. So if we have a target price in mind and it's realistic, then selling at that target price, unless something has materially changed in the pattern, that's when we ought to be getting out of those trades. So simply having a plan and following our plan can help us deal with greed. If you don't have a plan and you're not used to making decisions based on a plan, then greed begins to be a factor without you probably even recognizing that that's what it is. But sometimes fear and greed almost overlap. You think, well, if I get out now, what if it goes up? Or if I don't get out now, what if it goes down? So now we have this kind of interlocking area where fear and greed both meet each other. Should I stay in this trade, and what's my rationale? And sometimes I'll ask people, I'll say, well, what's a bigger deal to you? If you stay in that trade and it goes against you tomorrow, is that worse? Or if you get out today and you could make more money tomorrow, which one of those would be worse for you? And I think it's a legit question to ask when you're at a place where you really don't know. It's really a toss up. It could go either way tomorrow. It's just kind of in the middle. Market tone's a little iffy. Then to ask yourself that question, which one would be worse for me? If I stay in and it goes down, or if I get out and it goes in my favor, I could have made more money. Which one of those would be harder for me to deal with? That's going to give you a lot of insight as to what you should do with that particular trade. The other thing is, if you have multiple shares, you can also lock in profit on X amount of shares. And I normally say at least half of them. So let's just say you have 1,000 shares and you say, oh, I'm kind of at a point, I don't really know what it's going to do tomorrow. I'm not really sure kind of what's happening with this pattern or the market tone. Things are getting a little iffy here. Then sell off at least half of them. You could do more than half, but sell them off. Then you've locked in that profit. And if it does go up tomorrow, you make some money on some shares. If it drops the next day, you go, well, at least I locked in the profit when I could have with a majority of my shares. That's another way that you can deal with greed, is to go ahead and say, you know what, let me work my way out of this trade. So let me pyramid out of this trade. That's one way that you can handle that. So you can lock it in, know that you've got a certain amount of profit that you've already made, then you can see the next day. And if that helps you deal with that and to stay in a trade because you can kind of sense maybe it's fear, maybe it's greed, I don't even know what I'm dealing with at this time, to ask yourself some very, very legit questions, and that should help you answer those. So again, what is my stop out? Have I made this a line in the sand or a line in the concrete? Line and sands, they keep moving, right? As the waves come up, they keep moving. Line and concretes, they don't go away. So have a line in the concrete. If the stock reaches that, you get out. You don't make excuses. You don't overthink it. You get out. And when it comes to fear, you say, all right, I'm not going to be afraid because I believe that my desire for success is greater than my fear of failure. And then when it comes to greed, we say, all right, listen, what is my why? And is staying in this trade going to help me accomplish my why, or will it actually result in me having less money, the thing that I don't want? So be honest in your assessment and understanding patterns and understanding likelihood of movement, and then simply just executing the plan that you had, guys. That will help you overcome fear and greed. Well, thanks for being with us today for another edition of Tip Tuesday. We look forward to seeing you guys again next week. And this is Jeffrey Nance signing off.